now Kevin and Pam's kids know that at least one of them was conceived in the front seat of a truck. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave. I'm Julia. My old form name was No True Lady, and I'm also here with Bina 007. And we're doing a movie talk today about the very well reviewed, but not very well awarded movie, The Iron Claw, right?
Yeah, this is a totally hidden gem, apparently. I only
Yeah.
knew about it because it was already out in the UK. It hadn't crossed my path. And you were telling me, oh my God, this film is so amazing. I can't wait to talk about it with you. So I
Mhm.
sought it out and it blew my mind. I mean, I spoke a lot on our last movie podcast about how Poor Things, Oppenheimer, Zone of Interest were in this like auteur category for me last year. And then films like Anatomy of a Fall kind of coming very close underneath that and Past Lives. And this is in there. I mean, this is a phenomenal film. Why
Mhm.
are people not talking about this more? Why are they not going to see it more? Why did the studio A24, which has a great reputation in independent film, why did it not put this film in the festival circuit? Why is Zak Efron not being nominated for Oscars? I don't understand.
I
Oh,
decided to put all the eggs into the basket of poor things, so Bella could eat them raw and make some sort of pithy comment about it. Yeah, it is a bit of a mystery. I don't know if it's just because of the sort of film culture circles that I run in online that I knew about this movie before it came out and was
mm.
excited for it, and I do see people talking about it, but maybe it's because of my self-selected media culture community.
Yeah, but do you think there is something to the idea that with smaller films like this, like from A24, which is a smaller distributor, that there isn't the money to support everything, so they have to be
Yeah.
selective on what they're going to put forward? And because it shocked me that this just had a cold open in Dallas. I mean, it didn't even play Toronto or it didn't play any festivals.
Really?
And the guy who wrote it and directed it, Sean Durkin, has track record. His first film, Martha Marcy May Marlene, was like the critical darling at Sundance and went on to make a
Oh,
bunch of
yeah.
money. You know, it's not like he doesn't have track record. And I'm just really surprised this was just sort of left to dribble out in December and peak awards season and just feels like it was left and abandoned.
Hmm.
And I was thinking a lot watching this about the incredibly critically acclaimed film The Wrestler
Mhm.
and the way that came out. So that was a Darren Aronofsky film, and that played all the festivals. It won the Golden Lion at Venice, and then I think Mickey Rourke ended up being nominated for an Oscar. And I just felt like, why wouldn't this film have been given that run, like Venice, Toronto, London, into award season? But hopefully, this
See, I
podcast
think
gives you more to watch it though, at least.
yeah, I mean, I definitely know people, like I said, that sort of groups of people who are interested in such things, who find each other online as we do. They've been talking about it. I sort of took for granted that it was going to do that kind of festival run just because, because it is A24 and also just the nature of the film. I sort of just take those things for granted. But I mean, in all possibility, they decided, yeah, to put all that budget behind Poor Things, which, as we all agreed previously, is incredible and amazing, and we all love it. And I mean, I'm really baffled as to why Zach Efron hasn't didn't get any nominations for the Golden Globes or the Oscars, because I mean, he was incredible in this. He made me forget that the real Kevin Von Erich is a tall, lanky, blonde guy.
So I have to
um,
ask you, did you know the story of the Von Erich family before you watched the film?
Vaguely. Professional wrestling, I mean, definitely it's part of the whole, American stew, if you will. It's out there. And again, just sort of the interest groups that I run in, you do find people who are really into it. I remember when I lived in California, a friend hosted a watch party for WrestleMania. And, I've passively watched professional wrestling, when I was younger as a kid. If it's on TV, you watch it and be like, oh, what's this? I just that one experience learning that it was a lot more of a layered, complex thing.
It's so weird. I
And
feel that in England, wrestling, well, maybe it is a big thing and it's just not something that is big for me. The
mhm,
only time I've ever engaged with wrestling is kind of meta wrestling, so wrestling on film. So The Wrestler, obviously, the aforementioned
mhm.
film, and then TV shows like Glamorous Ladies of Wrestling, like Glow. But
Oh, yes, I am.
I've never
Oh, well, I'm
actually watched a wrestling match.
Huh. I've never seen one live. I've only watched them on TV, and again, then only sort of half interested. It is a topic that is very ripe for cinematic, creative exploration because you have this, a full spectrum of human drama, and then you have real athleticism with a lot of mixed in that are very potent. There is people really trying to succeed in their career. There's injuries, there's severe brain injuries, there's a lot of tragedy of wrestlers who die young, which is basically what this movie is about,
Is it worth
because they
saying
push.
to the listener that we're going to spoil the story of the film of the Von Erich
Yeah,
family?
we're gonna tell the whole story and then some because, for the sake of streamlining to tell a story within a film, they did leave out quite a bit.
Yeah. So we are going to
Mhm.
get into the story of this family. It is tragic, and if any of you listening have particular triggers around suicide, this is probably the time to turn off. Sadly, that is
And
going to be a bit of a theme here.
yes, and disordered eating and
Yep.
emotional abuse and well, I mean, it is a really good thing, a really really good story about the effects of of true toxic masculinity, true patriarchal culture, and escaping it.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's kind of weird to me. I was reading a lot of the reviews, and many are glowing, but some are critical
mhm,
and they say, oh, but it's just so depressing and it's a dirge. And I actually feel that when you go into that final act, it emerges hopeful, but maybe we
mhm.
can get into it as we go through the film. I had
Well,
no idea who this family was. I didn't even know it was a real
mhm,
family until the opening kind of title card that says this is based on a real story. So when we get to the
yeah,
second half of the film and the brothers just start dying, I was just in shock.
mhm,
And even today, I just rewatched it before this. I
mhm,
feel so emotionally affected. And viewers, if you haven't seen this film, you should switch off this podcast, but just know that this is such a beautifully recreated,
mhm,
emotional, rich, layered, gorgeous film about something we don't often see about film, which is brothers who love each other and, oh, just
yeah,
dealing with toxic masculinity, dealing with overbearing parents, living up to your parents' expectation. It's so relatable. But just seeing brothers on screen, that kind of shot, that dream sequence shot, it's so beautiful. And
mhm,
it just moved me deeply when that little kid out of the mouths of babe said, "Oh, what you talking about, Dad? Of course, we cry all the time. What's making you
mhm,
sad? That's okay, Dad. We'll be
mhm.
your brothers." I mean, to
Oh
me,
yeah.
this film just absolutely broke my heart, but rebuilt it.
Mhm,
It mended it and sent me off feeling bittersweet and
mhm.
hopeful. So please go watch this film.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's not at the end, it's an emotional release is what I've heard it
Yes.
described as. The idea of wrestling dynasties within the professional wrestling world is a very common thing.
Oh, okay.
There are plenty of families like this, who this is what they do, and well, we'll get into what became of some of the kids, but yeah, it's not an uncommon thing. I think
Okay.
also in professional athletics, it's not an uncommon thing in general, but definitely it's something you see in pro wrestling. So yeah, did you want to start us off? It's I believe it's 1978 or 79 right now.
So we start with a little flashback. So basically,
Oh
I think maybe
yes.
a way to do it is to do it through the brothers in order, but start with the parents, and that'll take us through the plot in a way.
Mhm.
So
Great
the
idea.
paterfamilias is Fritz Holt, who
Mhm.
is Fritz, the dad, Fritz von Erich, who has
Mhm.
renamed himself. He's actually Jack Atkinson, right? And he's
Mhm.
renamed himself to make a kind of avatar for wrestling, which is
Yes.
Nazi, which is
Yeah,
why.
in the wrestling world, it's referred to as a heel. There you're basically positioning yourself as the villain character,
The bad guy,
because
right.
mhm. Yes.
Um,
So
and he's played by Holt McElhenney, who it was really bugging me who he reminded me of. And I suddenly realized he was the main guy from Mindhunter. So if any of you were into that TV series, But
Oh.
he's basically set up in this kind of black and white flashback to be this thwarted man who thinks that the Wrestling Federation has robbed him of his chance at a world title and therefore is seeking revenge through his many sons who he basically coerces into becoming wrestlers and competing for the belts whether or not they show any particular affinity or desire to be wrestlers. And he there's an early scene where he openly says at the breakfast table, he kind of lists his sons in order of preference. This
Mhm.
whole thing like you never pick between your children, you love them all equally. He just openly says, right, the current order is this, and but remember the
Mhm.
order can change. So if you strive to please me, the order can change, and that just sets up the film and these
Mhm.
poor kids who feel trapped trying to please him and
Mhm.
claustrophobic in his ambition. And yeah, like you say, like the kind of, I guess the arc is the eldest son Kevin trying to break away, but he does have this wife, right? This wife Doris, played by Maura
Mhm.
Tierney, who
Mhm.
fans
Love
will
her.
remember, and yeah, love her, and fans of The Affair, the TV show. And she doesn't get much really to do. She's sort of this highly religious woman who I guess is swallowing a lot of her emotions. She has one scene near the end
Yeah.
where she gets to express them, but really she's very in the background. It's like this entire massive family is just at service of Fritz. Do you want to talk about them? I mean, I don't know. Is that typical for like a wrestling paterfamilias? I don't know, but horrible.
I mean, I don't know too much about the inner workings of wrestling families except for this one because I've researched it. But I mean, I think that, when you have this sort of like, highly driven sort of family unit, there has to be one really dominant parent and the other who's sort of more the supporting role. Doris is there basically feeding them. And one thing that I
Yeah.
do like that the movie gets right is the sheer amount of food that you have to eat to maintain this level of athleticism and physical activity and exercising and muscle building. That is accurate. I have seen it in people I know who train or did professional bodybuilding. So that was a nice little nod to the reality of it. Just like, yeah, here's your dozen eggs for breakfast, and that's just for one person.
And
Um,
it's a
but
feature of Sean Durkin's movies, isn't it? He makes them very realistic. I think
mhm,
this movie, the way they recreate the late 70s and early 80s through music and costume and
mhm.
set, so real and lived in and almost warm and welcoming. Like it's a world
Oh
you want to
yes,
and
yeah, no,
beautifully observed. And that's what he does. Like, and apparently for people who know wrestling, including the real life Kevin, who turned up here at the premiere, apparently the choreography of the wrestling scenes is absolutely impeccable.
oh well,
So
that's good.
yeah.
That's good. Yeah,
And let's comment on Zak Efron's body. Let's comment on maybe not Harris Dickinson's, but Jeremy Allen White. I mean, they look. I mean, he looks like a wrestler, right? I mean, he's got the
yeah.
physique.
Yeah, I
So
mean, part of it too is in order to see all those muscles popping out like that, to see that definition, that's not normal. The way the other brothers look, is much more normal. That like it's there, but it's sort of covered by, hydrated skin, hydrated bodies, or
yeah,
fat. And in order to get that definition for competition, for photo shoots, for a role, you have to do, and this is regardless, regardless or not, regardless isn't a word. Regardless of male or female, it's a process called cutting, where you severely cut down your diet and also purposely dehydrate yourself. That's the only way to get that definition. And it's a miserable thing to do. You can't really do it for long periods of time, but it is not the normal way the bodies look. Even even when you were at that level of musculature and fitness.
yeah.
So
It is
so we
amazing though, because that first shot of Zac Efron, where the camera
mhm,
really interrogates his body like he's a thing,
mhm,
it's very similar to how Mickey Rourke is shot in The Wrestler, and it really is. I mean, it's less
mhm.
extreme for the rest of the movie, but they've obviously they're making a point
Oh
about a
yes.
person who's almost like mutilated their body for
Mhm.
this thing, for this dream that maybe isn't even his dream. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything
And like
redeeming
real
about the dad? And should the mum have intervened? I don't
well,
know.
so here was my take on the parents. They weren't
Okay.
bad, but they were wrong.
Yeah.
They were wrong.
That's a good way
And
of
that's
putting it.
what and yeah, and that's what this very, high demand, high achieving, and extremely, traditionally patriarchal sort of, cultural configuration, family configuration leads to, period. And
Mm.
I feel like a point because like we start with the flashback of the boys being young and they're living in a camper that they drive around in their car, going from wrestling match to wrestling match. You got the two little boys in the back seat. Mom's pregnant with the next one, and and the dad's talking about how they're going to be more successful. He's already bought this new car that's waiting for them, and the wife's like, with what money? A very typical sort of conversation that you would see in that kind of a situation. And then we flash forward, roughly, I don't know, like 20-ish years, and you do see that they have done well for themselves. And they have this beautiful farm that, they've established themselves. They are doing well. And one thing that you feel throughout the film is that if the boys had just been left, I mean, like, yes, obviously they need, you need structure, you need, parents to help you figure out what you want to do. But if they had been less controlling, then the boys would have all been able to grow up past the age of 22 and be successful in their own ways,
It's so funny, isn't it?
like,
Because we're referring to them as boys, and it's so interesting how Fritz always refers to them as boys, even when they're in manhood. Like
well, that's
they're
a
just so infantilized, they're so controlled. They can't be men,
yeah,
right? They can't move
exactly.
out.
Exactly.
Uh,
And that was an interesting choice in the movie because the thing is, two of the brothers were also married. Like we're presented in the movie as like Kevin being the only one who, starts a family. But the fact is that, Terry was married and had two children, and the first one who dies, David,
mm.
he was also briefly married and did have a child who tragically died young, but I mean, like, it's not like he was the only one. But again, storytelling choices, streamlining the story, to focus on Kevin as the only one who quote unquote made it out.
Well, let's get in. Let's
Yeah.
start getting into the family then. So, when we meet them in 1979, we are already aware through Kevin that he's not actually the elder brother, even though we think he is. There was an
Hmm.
elder brother who died very young called Jack Atkinson Jr. Apparently, he died at the age of 6 in Niagara Falls. He stepped on a trailer tongue, was electrically shocked, and then fell into a
Yep.
melting snow puddle face first and drowned. I mean,
Oh yeah,
fuck
no.
me. I mean, that's just horrific.
Yeah, it is a true freak accident, but it's sort of the origin point of this legend of the curse on the
Yes.
family that is
Which
mentioned.
Kevin
Yeah.
legitimately believes in apparently, right? He thinks they're cursed. So
I'm not sure. I mean, I think very much at one point, I mean, there's a hard way not to believe it with everything that happens, but Jack Jr. dying like that was definitely the beginning of that. And also some thoughts of like taking the mother's maiden name von Erich, like maybe there was something associated with her side of the family, I think was sort of alluded to. Like bringing something onto them that wouldn't have been there otherwise.
yeah, it's
But
really it's fascinating, and I feel that I don't know when the movie opens for real in 1979, it is told through Kevin, who's kind of the elder brother or the eldest surviving brother, played by Zak
Mhm,
Efron. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on Zak Efron, right? This like
mhm,
gorgeous young teen in High School Musical, and then playing Ted Bundy with such acclaim. He's
mhm,
gone through so much in his personal life with mental health issues, addiction issues. He emerges sober, buff. He's done stuff to his face though, hasn't he? I mean, there's so many
mhm,
analogies to the actual making of the wrestler and Mickey Rourke going from teen idol to sort of, person who has in some ways created a face that is not quite his own. And then he shows up as Kevin and he's just
mhm,
heartbreaking, right? He's just such a lovely guy. He takes on the mantle of being big brother. He is caring towards the other brothers, even though they're in competition, even though he sees the one brother, one younger than him, David, who is surpassing him in his father's affections, because poor Kevin, though probably the best of the fighters, is he's not articulate. So he
right.
explained this was really helpful for people like me. He has a meet cute first date with Pam, played by Lily
Mhm,
James, who will go on to marry. And she says, "But it's all staged, isn't it?" And he's like, Yeah, but no, but because yes, the fights are staged, but you still have to go through the pain. You still got to do the fights. And then
Mhm,
also, it's all about the character and who the audiences
mhm.
root for, and that's what determines success. So, the fact that he's good in the ring but can't articulate himself out of the ring in the press conferences is kind of tragic. And then you've got David, who is kind of more of a natural showman, and he kind of takes over in his dad's affections. And I thought that was heartbreaking. But how did you? I mean, this is how you open it to me on Instagram Messenger. You were like, "You have to see the Iron Claw. This is Zak Efron's career best performance. Why is he not getting an Oscar?" So you
Yes.
tell me about Kevin.
Well, so one thing I do want to just sort of bring up when we do flash forward to when the sons are adults is,
Mm,
we do see this shot, these establishing shots of their farm, the beautiful, nature of Texas, which is definitely a thread through the story, and we see their house, and we get a classic Chekhov's gun moment, don't we? We
yes.
get a shot at a display case that has some guns in it, which first of all, that I mean, like, I think that that might be more of a relic of past years, because now with, in the past decades of the pushes for gun safety, you keep those in a gun safe, not you don't display them unless it's something that can't be fired, it's
Mm,
yeah. So you see that, you see these various totems of Americana, the family photos with the young son tucked in the corner, the one who died. And very much like, again, the creation of this setting, like it definitely feels familiar to me. Like these were the way the kitchens looked like early and mid 80s, because everything had been renovated in the 70s with these new looks, and we're still around,
mm,
what's like, the decade minus later. So it's, very like, yeah, it was a very warm, like, oh, I know where we are. But so we get Kevin, and Kevin's arc is really interesting because, as you already said, he is the one trying so hard and really putting himself through hell physically. And it's just not getting him anywhere with his dad, because despite the victories and the achievements and progress he does make, suddenly his dad will like inexplicably turn around and be like, and that's why David's going to be the next one. Or,
yeah.
and I mean, yeah, it is a big reason that David is able to do the stage presence, because I mean, yeah, the pro wrestling, it is a performance. It is that mix of athleticism and performance, the way say ballet is. Or being a Broadway actor, having to sing and dance and act. It's very similar to that. And if you can't get that sort of chatter part locked down, which is a huge part of it, you're not going to go anywhere. So
Yeah.
I mean, very quickly, despite the constant training and the constant effort, the dad just sort of keeps picking up on the other brothers one by one and pushing them to the forefront. And I feel like we never really got a good reason about why the dad was not interested in Kevin, other than Kevin not being able to do that sort of
I think that was enough. I think the dad was
yeah,
just incredibly ruthless. Made
yes.
actually what is a factually correct decision that Kevin will not be world champion because he is crap at the publicity stuff. I mean, we're
Mhm.
shown a scene where he's tortuous in front of a mic, and I think the
Mhm.
dad is kind of like just ruthlessly, coldly efficient. Not you, on to
Mhm.
the next, and then not you,
Yes.
on to the next. I mean, I think there's total logic in what the dad does. It's just absolutely brutal.
I mean,
And
it's
what's
wild that
amazing is, I mean, it bubbles up a little bit more between Kevin and Kerry, but actually between Kevin and David, it's not like they still love each other, these brothers. What's
mhm.
amazing is that the dad doesn't turn the brothers really against each other.
Part of the structure of the family is one of the ways that both the parents keep control over the boys, is that, and the mom straight up says it, like that at one point Kevin goes to try to talk to her, and she's like, honey, that's what your brothers are for, and
Yeah.
just completely shuts him down.
Don't look
you
to us for
know
emotional support. Go talk to your
Exactly,
bros.
it's each other, and they create this interdependence, among the brothers, and then really create this hierarchy with the parents being managers
Indeed.
versus
The
parents.
original momagers and dadages. Maybe we'll
Yes.
go to the next brothers and come back to Kevin at the end because he does kind of bookend this
Yeah.
piece. So we then
Oh,
move
I
to.
did
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to mention that, Kevin, as he continues facing, his dad not pushing him forward in any way despite all of his genuine efforts, he sort of starts to go off and live his own life. He meets this young woman, Pam, after a match, and Pam is fantastic, played by Lily James. She knows what she wants. She gets in there and she immediately offers him an alternative to that toxic masculinity patriarchal world. It's like, hey, it's almost 1980. The world's changing. I want to be a veterinarian with my own practice. I also want to have kids. What do you think
It's so
about that?
cute. When says, "Yeah, I
Hmm.
guess we'll be one of those modern marriages." And you're just
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Kevin, from all of your life experience, where do you even know what a working woman in a modern marriage looks like? I mean, bless you for like having that magnanimity. It's just so gorgeous. I totally believed in this relationship. And I think
Uh-huh.
Lily James is an interesting actress. And I think certainly in England, she's tarnished her image a little bit. But
Really? I
I
didn't know about
feel that
that.
she's taking on fat. She always used to play these simpering roles, and the epitome of that was the Cinderella live action remake.
Oh,
These
yeah.
passive fairy tale little girls. But she's chosen some fascinating roles in America recently. She played Pamela Anderson in Pam and Tommy, and I think she did an amazing job in
Oh,
that.
right. Yeah.
And I think this is another really fun, interesting role because it's nuanced. She could easily have just been pitted against the mum and dad because she's
Mhm.
trying to get her husband away from them. But actually, she has a lot of fun with the family and she
Mhm.
supports the mum in her mourning. But at the end of the day, she anchors Kevin. She gives him children, a family, an alternative center of gravity. And I think she saves him really. And it's a
Mhm.
really credible performance. It's a lovely, lovely depiction of a really good supportive marriage. And I just find Lily James is doing some interesting work, like quietly going about doing some interesting work and making some interesting choices right now.
No, I mean, like, I really enjoyed her, someone that I think both of us as modern, women, can link up with and be like, "Well, yeah, of course that's how it's gonna be," but it was still quite something back, 40 some odd years
I
ago,
think those
and,
of us who think that now, we stand on because she's our mum's generation basically, and
yes, yes.
we stand on the shoulders of that generation who had to have those conversations and say, I
Mhm.
want to live my life this way. Are you going to
Mhm.
support me in that, or is that going to be a problem? And I
Yeah.
thank I thank them for their service.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, and, the real Kevin and Pam are still together to this day,
I love it.
thriving. They live in Hawaii. They have, like, a farm out there. I mean, like, they're doing they made it. They think if they have 4 kids, we'll get to their kids later, but, so she is welcomed into the family. The dad, gives his seal of approval saying to Kevin, "Hold on to that one." But yeah, it is nice to see that it isn't that classic, pitting her against the family that and of course and family is the big theme of the movie. So we get to
Hmm.
see function versus dysfunction. And then, I feel like with Pam in there, you see the potential of what the Von Erich family could have been, or that
Yes.
there is this
And
closeness. There
becomes
is
in the next generation a
yes.
healthier
Yeah.
version, right? In the next generation.
Exactly, exactly. You see that for sure. So yeah, so they start their relationship. They get married and have, a quote unquote shotgun wedding because she's already pregnant. And like
Mm.
this is also when we sort of see the peak, the happy times, the good times of, they're going to parties and the younger brother Mike, who's this very sort of like gentle poetic soul. He wants to be a musician. We see him playing around with that. And
Should we do David next? Because he's the sort of next youngest, isn't he? He
yes, yes,
emerges as the
exactly. Yeah,
rival before Carrie. So he's played by Harris Dickinson, who's a British actor actually, and
really.
he's done a number of really fun films, including Triangle of Sadness that won the Palme d'Or at Cannes.
Oh yes.
And he was fantastic in that, playing a model. Very satirical, black, dark film. I would highly recommend Triangle of Sadness to anyone who
Hmm.
wants something so scabrous it bites. I didn't realize it was him at first because he, the hair, the sort of the wigs they all wear are just so hilarious.
Hmm.
He is a natural showman. He doesn't have the physique of Zak Efron. So if you were to
Mhm.
criticize, maybe he doesn't quite look like a wrestler. Maybe he needed to put on a bit more muscle.
Yeah,
But he is a
but
natural showman. The dad picks him
mhm.
to go to contest a fight in Japan because you've got to get the world belt that the dad thinks he's been denied. You've got to go win in Japan. He shows up to the Kevin's wedding, and it's actually that wedding scene is so beautiful. It's just so well done. So much going on there. But it's
Yeah, and
clear
it's
that he's not well. He's vomiting into the toilet bowl.
vomiting blood.
Kevin says,
Yeah.
you really shouldn't go. And they both just start laughing because they know it's not an option. And
Mhm.
then cut to the dad getting a phone call saying your son died of enteritis when he was out in
Yeah,
Japan, which the film
yeah,
seems to take at face value. This is what Ric Flair, who is a big character in the film, actually, like an antagonist of
yeah,
the
he's
family,
depicted.
he wrote in his biography to be the man. I mean, is there anything more toxic masculinity than that title? That, quote, everyone in wrestling believes that it was a drug overdose that really killed him, and that Bruiser Brody, a fellow wrestler who found David, disposed of the narcotics by flushing them down a toilet before the police arrived. Mick Foley, whoever he is, also claims that David died from an apparent drug overdose, which they don't really do. I think in the film it's just depicted as straight ahead, kind of like the curse of the Von Erichs, that he was just really sick, shouldn't have fought and died.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is a theory. And, Mick Foley is another wrestler. He's definitely like sort of an elder statesman of wrestling at this point. He's very well respected. Like he's like good friends with the musician Tori Amos, for example.
Oh, cool.
He's a real bit of a Renaissance man. But yeah, I had read that too, that there was that dispute. I think the official story was that he died of some sort of internal bleeding. And yes, it could have been, yeah, that he had ruptured intestines. So that's what the family says. And this is the official cause of death that the
Mm.
doctors in Japan who examined him determined.
And
So,
definitely
but
the
I'm
film is respectful of that. Like, there's no hint that there's anything else going on. So,
right.
uh,
Yeah. But I mean, again, it's one of those choices of, I mean, like, I feel like there was a lot of deference to the Von Erich family, to David, I mean, not David, to Kevin especially, which is fine. That's fine, and they're just trying to tell. I mean, there's a lot of story here, so you have to make those choices. But yeah, the wedding is sort of that last moment of pure happiness, of reveling in youth and starting off on your adult life, and then things really take a turn. And
absolutely. So you get the
yeah.
death of David, and it's kind of halfway through film, and then it just seems to be relentless. So David
Oh
dies
God, yes.
abroad, off screen, and then so therefore you think then that maybe the dad would once again turn to Kevin, but no, he turns to Kerry, the next brother, who's played by Jeremy Allen White, who everyone now knows from The Bear, the amazing
Hmm.
TV show, which is, by the way, not a comedy, and I guess from Jeremy Allen White's Calvin Klein commercials, where he obviously got ripped for this film and then used it to great advantage.
Oh
When
yes.
the
Yeah.
film opens in '79, he's actually not wrestling but training to do the discus at the Olympics. But then the US boycotted the 1980 Olympics for Cold War reasons.
Hmm.
So at that point, he's at a loose end. So he goes back into wrestling.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious to hear your interpretation of this. This is in the wake of David having died, the pressure from the father, which Kerry, a bit like Kevin, seems to really want to pander to the father and compete for his attention. So I
Hmm.
feel there's almost more tension between Kerry and Kevin than between Kevin and David. But he goes on a motorbike ride, and the way it's shot, it's him
Oh, and
looking
that was so
intensely
creepy.
straight ahead, and then it just
Hmm.
cuts to black. I mean, this is very much Sean Durkin in his Martha Marcy May Marlene mode. And then there's a scene which is so cleverly done where you see him sort of
Hmm.
waking up, crushing pills, his back is bruised, he's got crushes. But I mean, it plays it for a while. And it's only
Hmm.
when he rounds the corner into the kitchen that you realize that he's lost his foot in this accident.
Hmm.
And I want to ask you,
Hmm.
especially in light of what happens later, do you feel when he was riding that motorbike that he wanted to crash and commit suicide then?
Well,
Um,
I mean, you can want to die without really wanting to die. You can engage in high risk behaviors, and to have that passive sort of feeling because of stress. So I
mm.
think that was entirely possible. Um, you know,
So anyway,
uh,
he loses his foot. He obviously is in a lot of pain. He wants to train. It's very
mhm.
frustrating. Shades of Jamie Lannister here. I
Oh,
mean,
very
to me, it's
much.
insane that you would wear a fake foot and try and train to. I mean, the whole concept to me is just insane. He's obviously deeply frustrated, deeply angry with himself, with the world. He gifts his father a very pretty gun and the dad doesn't use it immediately, which is annoying to him. He calls his brother Kevin, clearly suicidal, but doesn't tell him where he is. And then we learn that he has committed suicide with that gun. So it's a very, very tragic end. He's a very sort of, I think we've come to know Jeremy Allen White as this very melancholy, soulful actor when he wants to be. And
Mhm.
all of that is injected into Kerry, and it's heartbreaking. And poor Kevin, two brothers gone in very short order. Yeah, I mean, so that was my question on him, really, is like, because we don't really see the family in this, we don't see that he's married, but how far was this the foot going? How far was this inevitable? Yeah.
Well, I
Thoughts on
mean
Kerry?
I think it's all part of, the combination of the way that they have been raised and pushed, and, he did wrestle afterwards with a prosthetic foot, and the public never knew about the crash and
Wow.
I think they probably knew about the crash, but not the amputation, which is a
Wow.
huge athletic feat. I mean, so this
Mm,
tells me that this man was an incredible athlete. So, I mean,
absolutely.
to go back a little bit to, we see him training to be in the Olympics. It was a huge deal when the U.S. bowed out of those Olympics because when it comes to professional athletes, you can only really count on getting one Olympics. Like the really famous ones who go to lots of Olympics. There's not many of them. So that
Mm,
action by who was it? Was it Jimmy Carter at the time? Who freak was president of the United States in 1979? I think that was Carter. The decision ruined a lot of careers. It did.
yeah.
It genuinely did. And we see that happening to Carrie. Because like I mean, a lot of his, age. It's like, it's when are you at your peak, athletically? When a lot of things have to line up. Money and it's so to have that pulled out from under you, it affected a lot of people. And it was boycott. Yeah, it was Cold War stuff, boycotting the Soviet Union, et cetera, et cetera. Was that when they were invading Afghanistan? Was that the actual reason? I don't know. That might have been.
Yeah, 79. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, that was part of it. And we do see him kind of listless and he goes home because, what else are you gonna do? And he's immediately, welcomed back into the fold. And, instead of being like, well, maybe you can go back to training and, maybe you can have your Olympics in a couple more years, it's immediately like, hey, okay, you're gonna come wrestle now, and we do get a very fun sequence of, the boys at their peak, the three, Kevin, David, and why can't I think of the third brother? Oh my God. Carrie, the three of them, they do become famous in the wrestling scene
Yeah.
there. And they, you do have some really fun wrestling sequences, and the actors really going for it. And yeah, I mean, again, like the exploration of the masculine physique. I mean, like and I felt like it wasn't sexualized. I didn't feel any sort of, improper gaze. It was just sort of like the realities of what these people had to do.
Mm,
Yeah, but I mean, again, you do start seeing, you do get hints of Carrie being in trouble because there's the scene where they're at a party and you see that he's doing cocaine, and Kevin sort of looks askance, but lets it go. And you just get little hints throughout that he's unstable, maybe never really getting over missing those Olympics, and then being pushed into wrestling. And he does really, really well, but then starts to, fall apart after the accident and losing his foot. And the fact that he could come back and wrestle with the prosthetic technology they had at the time, which was, vastly different than what we have today, and that they were able to keep it a secret, that is a massive accomplishment.
I agree.
Um,
And actually,
yeah.
I mean, it's kind of weird because in a way, and I think this is a problem that some have had with the film, if they're like major wrestling fans, is they think that basically the film, by focusing on this tragic emotional side of the story, doesn't pay enough attention to their great technical and physical and wrestling achievements.
Hmm.
And I can kind of see that, actually. I can kind of see that.
Hmm.
I don't agree with it. I think it's a great film, but I
Hmm.
can see it.
Yeah. So of
Okay, so
course,
shall we move on to poor little Mike?
yeah. Oh my gosh, poor little Mike. He is the sensitive, poetic one. And what I did want to actually quickly mention with Carrie, he did kill himself on the family property.
Yes.
As it was depicted. in the movie. Let's see, I just want to check. You know, he did start having issues with painkillers. He was, I mean, like it is sort of alluded to that he was getting in trouble, and yeah, and then he did kill himself on the ranch, and he was barely 33.
Oh.
So that was yeah, so that's what happened there. But
And then poor
and
little
then
Mike, who was the musician when we first see him in '79. He's got a garage band. He's always nerdling on his
mhm,
guitar. He seems to have real talent. That said, I mean, like the
mhm,
music to this film is composed by Richard Reed Parry of Arcade Fire, did the music. So the
okay,
rock songs are genuinely cool rock songs. And he basically is forced into the ring. He has no aptitude for it. He doesn't have the physique for it.
mhm,
He basically injures his shoulder. He has surgery. It doesn't go as planned. He gets toxic shock syndrome that puts him in a coma. And then
mhm,
the next time we see him, he's sort of in a press conference in a sling, and it looks like he has some kind of brain damage. He's slurring his words.
mhm,
And but he's going to be put back in the ring. Everyone's like, yeah, but look what a great fighter he is.
mhm.
And he just can't take it. He commits suicide. He takes tranquilizers, and must also have been incredibly young. I mean, looks very young on screen. Played by a guy called
Yeah.
Stanley Simmons. He's done a few bits here and there, but nothing. This must be his breakout role, I guess. But
Yeah, yeah, no, he was
how
very
old was
good.
he when he died? Because I mean, he can't
Uh,
have been.
23.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
and I mean, again, this was, you know, storytelling choices. What he actually did was he went to a nearby park
Mm,
and overdosed and died that way and was found later. And then what they showed in the movie was that he did the same thing, but only just walking out onto the family property a bit,
yeah.
and then being found by the family. Which I mean, not totally. I feel like, you know, it's honoring the spirit versus the letter, you know, and but you know, just having to keep everything, you know, sort of streamlined and put together. Yeah, and it was actually, you know, visually beautiful. The family walking out into the
Yes.
fields,
Yes.
calling his name, and then you see one, you know, start yelling, and then everyone else starts running, and you don't have to see, you know what's happened.
Actually, all of
You
it's
know.
very respectful, isn't it?
Hmm.
Like the motorcycle accident. Like it's amazing how little they. Sean Durkin's a master of this in all
Hmm.
his films.
Yeah,
That
it's
was to
worse
me
when you
one of the
don't.
most
I
heartbreaking
was going to
because
say
he's
it's worse when you don't see it, because then you
yeah.
imagine.
But what a kid.
Hmm.
Apparently, and so that's basically the final death in the film. But it's worth pointing out there was another brother called Chris von
Yes,
Erich who also
Chris.
died by suicide, age 21, from a gunshot. Apparently, he was really like he was short, he was asthmatic, he was in no way shape meant to be in the
Hmm.
wrestling ring. But nonetheless, pressure puts you in there, and
Hmm.
he wanted to be with his brothers apparently, and I
Yes.
think that's what's depicted, isn't it? I think there's a beautiful scene near the end of this film where Kevin, he's in real life, well, in real life, he's in the film with the dead body of his brother, but he imagines those that have gone reuniting, so the three fully
Hmm.
grown brothers and actually the little kid, the 6.5-year-old little
Oh,
kid.
yeah.
And
No,
it's
that was.
shot so beautifully by the cinematographer Matthias Erdely. And if it doesn't get dusty in the cinema or wherever you're watching this when you see that scene, it broke me. It just broke
Oh,
me.
yeah. No, there was not a dry eye in the house, myself included. When I saw it, definitely it grabbed everybody. And that was
Mhm.
the purpose of it.
And I feel that that's in a way the film gives you, in a sense, in these two end scenes, there's that sequence. So the people who've gone, who are in this
Mhm,
beautiful sunlit haze, and they're together and they're brothers, and there's no dad to
mhm.
boss them around, and they're just happy. And
Yeah.
then there's the kind
And
of the real world end scene, which is, fast forward a number of years, Kevin has sold the franchise and he's got his own kids now, and they're the little baby blonde brothers. And he's
mhm,
crying, he's watching them play, and he's just crying and crying. And because he's been raised in this toxic masculinity, he apologizes for crying. And as I said earlier, I just think it's the most heartbreakingly, but also uplifting scene where the two little boys, thank God for generational change, right? They're just like, Dad,
mhm,
don't apologize for crying. We cry all the time. That's all right. And then the other
mhm,
brother says, What's making you sad? And he says, Well, I guess I just miss my brothers. And the two boys say, That's okay, Dad. But you can be our brother. And then they hug. And you just
mhm,
feel that he's going to be okay because these kids do not have that toxic masculinity. They express
mhm.
their emotions and they're going to support him. And and then you see the end coda and you see this picture of, you know, the wife and him and all their kids and grandkids, and it's just joyous.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
I
they
do
did
feel
indeed.
that reviewers don't get it. If they think this is a bummer of a film, it's not. It's a
Mhm,
film about a survivor who
mhm.
created a family that wasn't toxic from one that
Right.
was.
Yeah, and in the end, they bought a farm and everyone came to live with them, that's it, and that was
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, no, definitely that last part of the film, there was sniffles aplenty in the theater. Yeah, I wanted to actually go back to that really beautiful, imagination dream sequence of the afterlife,
Mm.
because it was so beautifully done, and I started losing at the moment that, okay, so, Carrie dies, and Kevin picks up his body and brings it into the house, lays him on the dining room table. Just a very symbolic. You got the whole Christ-like imagery, and the symbol of like everything happening in this family home. All this tragedy, and then you have this vision of Carrie walking out of the house barefoot, and you realize he's whole again. He has his foot back. And I started losing that because I started losing it at that point because that's such a beautiful thing. If you believe in an afterlife, anything like that, that one of the promises is that we will be whole again physically. If you had those issues in life, that you will be restored, that you will be, yeah, made whole. So I started being like, oh no, this is what everyone was talking about, how it's going to make you cry. And it's just, beautiful. He's in a boat, again, symbolism of moving into the afterlife. And the other brothers are waiting for him. And Mike has his guitar, and David is just, decked out in his sort of, cowboy finery, and they're themselves again. They're restored, and then you turn
Yeah.
around and you see the little brother who's, eternally 6 years old, but he's there, and they all hug, and then they, go off into this beautiful field. And what is the afterlife if not, a beautiful grassy field in summer? Like that's what we all hope for, to be reunited and an eternal beautiful summer. And I'm actually kind of upsetting myself a little bit thinking about it. But yeah, so Kevin does make it, and then we do see, the dissolution of the parents, because there's a moment of it's when Mike is still trying to recover after the complications from his surgery, leave him, brain injured, and like he and the mom are sitting, and he's looking up, their walls are covered in pictures and photos, and there's this painting, and she's like, "Hey, that's not." She's like, "Oh, that's the house I grew up with." He's like, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah." She says, "Yeah, I painted that." And it's like, "I didn't
Yeah.
know you painted." And there's just a very short scene at the end in the now empty, dark house where the mom is painting, and the dad comes in. He's like, "What's for dinner?" And she's like, "I don't know. I haven't made it." And it's just like, oh, she's had enough. And in real life, the mom, they did end up separating after all this happened.
Mm.
So that was a really nice way of showing that,
Yeah,
I
it's an
thought.
amazingly written and acted role, isn't it? Because Mauritanie has very few scenes. She can has one at the
Mhm,
beginning with the husband when he buys the flashy car,
mhm,
and then she has the one with Pam, Lily James, when they're mourning the son, and
mhm,
she's in front of the dress and having her moment, and then this one at the end, and it's testament to her and her presence.
mhm.
That even with that light touch, I really feel I see an arc for her, and I see
Yes,
fulfillment and positive,
yes,
and I kind of feel I know that woman, that kind of woman, through this
yes.
very. I mean, in a way, she could have
Uh,
got a Best Supporting Actor nod because to do so much with so little is really quite something.
yeah, I mean, I know that woman. I've seen shades of that around other women and mothers and wives and people, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and in a semi-rural area, and so a lot of cultural tradition did still reign, and there were a lot of women around who, they might have worked outside the home, but they still very much were the people taking care of the household, the
Mm.
kids. And, I would hear, as I was getting older, my mom having discussions with her other friends, and how, like, well, the last son went to college today, and I just stood at the sink and cried, because it's like, well, what do you do with yourself now? And so, yeah, they did very succinctly show that kind of an arc, but in this very, very specific, setting of just repeated tragedy, of that moment of her just being like, not doing it anymore. Sorry.
Yeah.
It was a real good for her moment.
Mm.
And again, what I said at the beginning, that the parents weren't bad, they were just wrong. So I didn't necessarily want to see punishment. I didn't want to see comeuppance. I just wanted to see consequences. And we got that. Does that make sense?
Mm. That makes absolute sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this is what would happen. But I feel like I went into this movie not sure what it was going to be like, and at first I was kind of like, I didn't know if I liked it or not, but now I have had some distance and I really appreciate it for what it was. And like, because it's an A24 movie and they've sort of established themselves through movies like The Witch and Hereditary and Midsummer as like weird stylized horror movies. I almost thought this was going to be, more horror adjacent. Like the title, The Iron Claw, like that is very, evocative. But no. And now that I, just let the movie be what it is, then, it's like, yeah, this was really good. And what it was a pretty straightforward family drama and also a period piece, talking about
Mm.
America at the end of the 20th century. And we see those changes. We see women's roles changing. We see men's roles changing. But here's something interesting about the kids is the two brothers who are depicted. What are their names? Marshall, and they're real people. Marshall and Ross. Guess what? They're professional wrestlers now. Even after, and this is what I was talking about with these wrestling
This is
dynasties.
phenomenal though, because one would hope, and I think I would hope
Mhm.
that they're wrestlers on their own terms, like they're doing because they see there's a brand name, there's a family
I
legacy,
hope
but
so.
one hopes and I think it must be right because we're not seeing that level of tragedy and well, maybe it's not manifesting in the same way, but I do find it phenomenal when you see everything that's happened in this film, which is just a slice of everything that really happened,
Mhm.
that they want to take that forward. You really do, but
Yeah.
gosh.
Well, I mean, actually, I mean, for me, when I first found that out, I had the opposite reaction of just like, after everything your family went through and you wanted to do this. I
Mm.
mean, I definitely see your point for sure. It just, I just found it to be very surprising. And they're these tall blonde guys, as their family produces, and they're like, I want to say in their 30s. Yeah, but they're the little boys at the end of the movie there. But I mean, I would like to think that they are doing it on their own terms, and things are a lot safer. And I mean, like at one point in the movie, it's drug use is hinted at. I mean, steroids are hinted at, and you don't see which brother's injecting it. It's a very quick scene. You blink and you miss it. But like that's alluded to, and I mean that's still a big issue in the fitness world in general and competitive sports in general. I mean, so best of luck to the next generation. Sorry, I had to do that little moment. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I
But
think it's going to be okay. I really do because I think
mhm,
that when you can see it in the film, you can see it in Pam and Kevin. And
mhm,
of course, they're going to have the same bullshit ups and downs that we all have in our lives. But I think
mhm.
you take the Fritz character out of that weirdness, and I think it kind of
Yeah,
reverts to the normality of
yeah, yeah.
bullshit,
No,
but
yeah,
doesn't matter.
yeah. No, like I said earlier, if they just let them be who they are, they're going to succeed on their own terms. Oh, and one other thing, one other kid, Carrie, who in the movie, we did not see him having a wife and child, even though he did in life. He had two kids. One of his daughters, Lacey, also became a professional wrestler, and she has since retired from it. But she did professional wrestling, and now she has a family of her own, and done. So she's out there doing her thing.
Mm.
Which is pretty amazing. That even though it killed her father, she went into it and was successful, and and it looks like now she's sort of able to live her own life. That she lives in SoCal now and apparently runs an advertising company. Good for her. Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, the very end of the movie, we see Kevin made it out, and he and Pam, yeah, they bought a farm, and everyone came to live with them, which is
Mm.
very very sweet. And yeah, so really just I don't even want to say it's a cautionary tale. It's just here's what happened and here's why it happened.
Mm. Exactly.
Yeah.
But also
Hmm.
that. from that can come love, joy, good, that wedding
Mhm.
sequence, the
Mhm.
evident love between the brothers, and the fact that this ends up with kids and grandkids who survive. I
Mhm.
want to encourage people to watch this film. It was so little watched. So I
Mhm.
know we've majored on the tragedy, and that is the text of the film. But it's
Oh, yeah,
important to
it is.
recognize that it wouldn't matter if it was just dirge after dirge. It wouldn't matter.
Mhm.
It's because we recognize that fraternal love and see
Mhm.
the kind of almost childlike goodness in someone like a Kevin, that it
Mhm.
matters and it affects you deeply. Anything else
Mhm.
you want to say on this lovely film?
I mean, I wanted to talk a little bit about the land of the family farm that we see time and time again, even certain
Mm.
shots of like the front driveway with that one tree. And it really, and it starts to become, a thing that makes you tense up when they show it because you're like, oh God, what happened now? Because the family home is the site of much tragedy. But the interesting thing is the land doesn't change. The land it's beautiful, it's serene, and it's bearing mute witness to all of this tragedy. And it almost swallows it up at times, like when they go and they find the youngest brother's body, and and Carrie kills himself, right outside the front door, basically. It's a remarkable way to frame all the action in this beautiful nature. And then we see after the afterlife is okay, we finally get to go and be in this nature, on our own terms, and enjoy it and appreciate it, and it's no longer just sort of sitting there not being utilized, if you will. So it's just, yeah, just something that really stuck out to me because I love a good sort of, natural vista shot, if you will. But I think in conclusion that now Kevin and Pam's kids know that at least one of them was conceived in the front seat of a truck.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Yes.
I love it. Well, let's
Kids
end
go,
on that
yeah.
note because that is a phenomenal note on which to end. Yeah, let me know when there's another film that you absolutely love that I need to watch because you are spot on with this one. This was absolutely
Oh,
a
thank you.
banger, and thank you so much. It's
Mhm.
brought great emotion to my life.
Mhm.
All right, well,
Yeah.
have a lovely, lovely
Yeah.
rest of the evening, and this has been a pleasure, Julia. Maybe you can
Yeah.
just say, what are you looking forward to? You're plugged into the right circles, and good indie films tend to come out in New York before they hit London. So, anything coming
Uh,
up that you're excited to see? I mean, obviously, Gene's coming out in a week's time. We have our tickets for that, so we're excited. But anything small scale indie that you're looking forward to?
I got to think about that because I haven't really started getting back into that mindset yet. Because I mean, honestly, it's still coming down from the holidays and all that. But I am really curious about the Joker Folie à Deux movie coming out, which I'm not sure if that's going to be small scale per se. There's the movie with Sydney Sweeney, Immaculate, which looks really interesting. I am a sucker for any kind of like Catholic religious iconography done in a beautiful way. Yes, I really love the Young Pope, New Pope series.
Did that officially ever get cancelled, or is it that still sort of out in the ether somewhere?
The Young Pope, New Pope series. I mean, like it was just a
Yeah. Okay.
self-contained 2 season series. I mean, they kind of finished it up with they told a story, and that was it.
Mm.
And that's fine. That's fine. It stands just fine on its own as a single story. So I think those are kind of the only ones I'm really aware of. I saw this trailer for the new Dev Patel movie Monkey Man, where basically it's like he's Goku but trying to take down a criminal empire. So like,
Wow.
okay, all right. Well, I mean, I guess there's some allusions to the classic like some of the classic fairy tale creatures in Asian and Indian mythology, like the one monkey god. Okay, so it isn't about Dragon Ball, but like certain parts of the anime Dragon Ball are based on like the old Journey to the West and whatnot. So like I saw that and I was kind of like, oh, so they're taking that same source of inspiration but going in this other direction.
Mm.
So but it's like an action film in that sort of a Bollywood vibe, but definitely like mixed also with just conventional Hollywood. So sort of interested in that. Dune Part 2 comes out in a couple weeks, but of course again that's not small. I'll tell you one that I'm not interested in is Civil War, which is going to be
Really?
another A24. Yeah, it's with Kirsten Dunst and her husband. What's his name? What's his
Yeah, and
name?
also it's an Alex Garland film, so he did Ex Machina, Annihilation. I'm looking forward
Mhm.
to that because I
Yeah,
love Jesse
I mean,
Plemons, I love Kirsten Dunst, I like Alex Garland. To me, that I'm really intrigued,
yeah.
and also there's not much knowledge of what that's going to be about, right? So I'm kind of intrigued by
Oh,
that one.
yeah.
Why are you not into it? Why do you not want to see
I,
it?
I was going to say Jesse Plemons is her husband. That's right. Because I've been living this very bizarre moment in American history now that we've been doing since about 2015, and there's been that sort of background talk of like we're going to have a second American Civil War any minute, and I just don't see where those lines would be drawn. And in the because this was actually one of the trailers that they had in Iron Claw, and I saw it with my cousin. She cried too. We all cried. And we see the trailer for Civil War, and like part of it is and the alliance between California and Texas, and we look at each other. I'm like, that would never happen. It's just I'm just curious to see how they make this plausibly work because it's just not like the first Civil War that we did, just like the Civil War that you guys did about 200 years before ours. You remember that one? There were very distinct lines. You guys had the royalists versus the parliamentarians. We had
Mm.
slave state versus free state, and here it's just kind of like a general sort of like much more sort of soupy, indistinct. Some people think they don't like other people from this part of the country, and a lot of it is just sort of ginned up cultural stuff that if it were to sort of be if people would sit down and talk to each other, they would find out that they have a heck of a lot more in common than they realize. And also that, the people who they think are their enemies aren't, or the problems they think are the problems aren't. It's like, I'm sorry, but that's just how college kids act. And that's how it's always been and how it always will be. And just ignore it because it doesn't really signify anything. So why are
Well,
you
so long as
worried
they
about
grow
it?
out of it, as long as they actually
Yeah.
grow out of it, which
Well,
I
I
think
mean, and
extended
most of us do.
infantilization of children, I'm not sure they do these days. So the films
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to, I am looking forward to Civil War. I'm also looking
Yeah,
forward
tell
to
me.
I love Kristen Stewart. I think she's phenomenal. I think she makes really fascinating choices with her life and with her art. And she
Mhm.
had a film or has a film called Love Lies Bleeding that played Sundance.
Oh,
I
I've
think
heard about that. I am
it's
interested in that,
playing
yes.
Berlin right now, and it's coming to so the BFI, they have the big London Film Festival in October that kind of
Mhm,
plays into the whole award season run. But they also
mhm.
have the world's oldest LGBTQIA festival called Flair, and that runs
Oh.
every March, and it's really phenomenal. And Love Lies Bleeding is playing there, so I'm really interested to see that. And there's
Mhm.
actually also going to be a screen talk by Elliot Page, and then the screening of his new film. So I am very excited to see Love Lies Bleeding and Elliot Page, and their new
Oh,
film.
wait,
Not their new film, his new film. Am I getting that right? I'll
what's
edit it out.
what's that? I wanna say I'd heard about that movie. What's that about again?
Okay, so the film is called Close to You. It was actually released in
Okay.
2023, directed by Dominic Savage and starring Elliot Page. They wrote the story together and both produced it, and it's filmed using a highly sort of improvisational style. It showed at Toronto
Okay.
last year. So Sam,
Okay.
who's Elliot Page, is heading back home for a family reunion, bumps into an old friend. He is the only real person in the cast that you will have heard of. So yeah, Greenwich Entertainment acquired the US distribution rights in Jan 24, so it will come
Okay.
out. But yeah, I just think it's really fascinating that someone like Elliot Page is having to almost create their own films to give themselves a platform for the things they want to talk about. Because conventional Hollywood will find it hard to categorize Elliot Page, I think, which is sad. But anyway, I think I'm
Mhm.
really looking forward to that screen talk. That
Yeah.
said, Yorgos Lanthimos and Emma Stone have already filmed an entire other film other than Poor Things. So let's see what happens
Oh,
with that.
yeah. Yes, I did hear about that.
Maybe that'll do the sort of Toronto Venice run this year, and we'll get that.
Yeah, and Cannes is what, early May, something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, thank you for listening to the after show chat. Thank you for making it this far. And this is what happens when people who know each other don't get to talk that often, is we have to catch up on everything.
Absolutely.
Um,
All right, listen, we hope
mhm,
you enjoy the Iron Claw and let us know what you think. Post a comment on the YouTube channel, drop in on the
mhm.
Discord server, have a chat, and tell us what movies we should be checking out. Thanks, guys.
Exactly. Bye.